Countdown. Okay, so recording's back on. Welcome back. So question from Craig was, can licensing for a tax simulator be gained? I think he means gained. Do you users need a license? So the answer is yes. The way to think about any licensing from Microsoft in general is if a user derives direct benefit from the service or capability, they need to have a license. All right, so that would be the generic rule I would apply, but the answer to your question is yes. Every user who is subject to an attack simulation requires a license. Question from Farzad. When we upgrade Windows 10 Home to Enterprise, I hope you don't do that because that's probably not a good thing if you're doing it over the top. But yep, so let's say when you go to Windows 10 Enterprise and you move it to Intune, does Defender version change? So no. The Defender endpoint, the AV engine that is on Home, Pro, and Enterprise is exactly the same. That's why it's the best in the business, right? You look at all the current testing, Defender AV on the endpoints is superior to any other version provided out there. And it's the same on every version of Windows. So you're getting enterprise grade AV on your Windows 10 home machine. Defender for Endpoint provides additional facilities, a centralized console, EDR, XDR, all that sort of investigation capability. But as a standalone engine for free, nothing beats it, even if you were to pay for it again. So it's far superior to anything that's out there, and it's the same version on every version of Windows. So John's asking, what would you recommend to protect encrypted sensitive data on a laptop? So it depends. So if you have a laptop set up correctly, it already should have BitLocker on it. So the files on the laptop are already encrypted along with every other file using BitLocker. So there's level one. Level two is you could then implement Windows Information Protection, WIP, which we'll talk about. Windows Information Protection allows you to encrypt files which you have nominated as being corporate files in a corporate container. So we set up a policy in Windows Information Protection to nominate that OneDrive is a corporate container, and any file in a corporate container, no matter where it is, needs to be encrypted. Therefore, the files would be encrypted again on any synchronized data in a OneDrive for Business on a local laptop, which hopefully also has BitLocker on it as well. Okay. Now, if the user is removed or reset, password, or whatever, they would need to re-authenticate to gain access to any of those files protected by Windows Information Protection. So that provides the second level there. The third level, which is about protecting individual files. So again, think of BitLocker as protecting, encrypting the container. Windows Information Protection protecting the share, like the corporate share where the corporate data lives, the corporate container. You can use something which we'll talk about called Azure Information Protection, and Microsoft sort of calls it Microsoft Information Protection now, to encrypt individual file items as well. So you can encrypt individual file items, send them to anybody on the internet, and you can control how they access those files. So there's generally 3 to 4 different ways to encrypt and protect information, depends how you want to do it. BitLocker's the no-brainer, easy way to get every single file no matter what. The Windows Information Protection is a good way to target just corporate data, right? The whole of the corporate data. And Azure Information Protection, AIP, MIP, is the way to target individual files if you want to go down that level. Okay, so that's what I would be suggesting, as the best option there. Jerry's question I have answered in the chat there with a couple of links that I've written. In essence, I don't believe there's any need for third-party backup products with Microsoft 365 Business Premium, provided it is correctly configured. All right, so I'm happy to talk to anybody about that, but I see that there is no need to add additional complication, vendor, supply chains, and all that sort of stuff. The choice is yours, 100%. Read the articles that I put in there. And there are a lot of people who agree, a lot of knowledgeable people who agree with my approach. But again, the choice is up to you. All right, are there any other questions there for you before we continue on? Ooh, coffee tastes good. All right, so no questions. All right, so where's my slide deck? Here it is. So let us talk about my recommended Outlook add-in. So there are two that I'd recommend as a minimum. One is report message, so that allows you or the customer to say, is this junk? But it also allows them to report phishing, and I'll show you that. The other one is message header analyzer. Now, this is a really, really good way to go in and see whether the email that has been received basically conforms to things like SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. So where's my Outlook? Let me see if I go to my Outlook, and hopefully there's nothing too incriminating in here. Lots of warning messages. Let me see if I can find one which is not a warning message. Let me pick this one. Okay. So here's an email that I've received here. Again, for me, very, very interesting thing here. You'll see here I've got the report message here. So if I click on this, the add-in allows me to report it as junk, but this is the important one here. It allows me to report it as phishing, right? So the user can nominate it as phishing. Now, what's the benefit of that? Well, when a user reports it as phishing, it improves the intelligence of the, of the detection in your own tenant. It adds to that intelligence, and it adds to the global intelligence. So you're improving the capability for that to be recognized within your own tenant and also in every other tenant around the world. Now, the other benefit of that, if we go back to let's go to it. Actually, I'll go to it this way because I know how to get to it. The other benefit is what you do, or you can do, I do this, but it's up to you whether you want to do this, is you can set up an alert. We talked about alerts that can tell you when a user reports an email as phish. So if they do select that option, let's go in here, look at our alert policies. I think I can do a search here. Phish. Okay. Hopefully when it comes up. So I have an alert that will fire when a user marks an email basically as phish. Okay. So that's the delivered one. But basically, it's this one here. It is. So here, email reported by a user as malware or phish. Okay, in this case, it's a default rule that Microsoft has provided me. If you haven't got that, I'd certainly set that up as a manual thing for yourself. And that's what that option will do. Where did that go? Oh. Did I open that? Oh, I must have opened another window. Sorry, let me find that email. Where is it? There it is. So that's what that option does here when you report it. So I think that's a valuable add-in, helps train the user, helps improve the intelligence for everybody. Okay. The other one is, so that's also down here as we showed. The other one here is the message header analyzer. So again, gives you lots of information about the email, but if I go into the cake option, you'll see that it shows you the authentication results, the SPF record, the DKIM signature, and so on. So it breaks down the information and makes it much more readable when you're troubleshooting emails. It also, for example, allows you to say which servers did it come from. And then you'll see here, it also tells you the spam confidence level and the spam rules that it went through. So these are all the rules. Again, they're just GUIDs, like GUID things there, that will show you the conditions or the policies that has been through, and that's how it's gone. If you click on any of these, you'll see you get more information about getting more details using a message trace. So again, the two that I would recommend you add in to an environment are going to be report message. Again, they're free, and the report analyzer. Now I'll show you how to push those out shortly. So just keep those in mind. I'll come to an interesting thing here shortly. Now, the other recommendation with emails is don't allow auto forwarding, right? So we all, as I highlighted yesterday with my PowerShell script, you can forward from the mailbox, you can set Outlook forwarding rules, you can also set what is known as suite. My advice is you disable forwarding for every mailbox and the whole tenant. The only way somebody can forward is if they fill in an application, gets approved by management, and then you create a transport rule to do that forwarding. Okay, so 1, it has to be approved. 2, it's audited and it's documented. 3, the only way that the forwarding is configured is it's done by an administrator, and that particular transport rule can be scrutinized at a much greater level than a user being allowed to forward. So the reason is simply what's the very first thing that an attacker does when they gain access to a compromised email? They go in and they create forwarding rules to cover their tracks and to send all the information outside the organization. And let's be honest, there are very few users that need to forward emails by default out of the organization. Yes, there are some, I agree, but it's a very, very, very small percentage. And a much better way to do that is with an approved transport rule created by the administrator. Okay. Now, this area here is probably the up and coming thing to start paying attention to in regards to mailbox compromise. We're beginning to see this, and I think this is going to be far more devastating than what we are seeing at the moment, and I'll explain why. So what would happen is a user would receive an email that would say, oh, we have a new antivirus capability or a new improved mailbox or a pretty picture of a cat that you can add to your Outlook. Click here to add it. So they'll get a message that you see is like this. There'll be a button there that says, oh, connect it to your Outlook or Office 365. And then they will be popped up with something that looks like this. These are effectively OAuth permissions. All right, so what's happened in the background, and I'll show you this at a low level, is that it's creating an Azure Id App. We talked about this a little bit before in regards to backups, right? Now, the thing here is you'll notice if you look carefully, okay, this particular app is asking for, look at the bottom option or bottom 2 options, read and write your files, read and write items in all site collections. So if the user clicks accept there, they are providing a way for that app and whoever controls that app to have full access to every file that user has access to without the need for them to log in with the user's credentials. Right, so let that sink in. This is the approach attackers are going to take more and more and more to trick users to allow them the permissions to do whatever they want on the account. So if we look at this in a bit of a in a technical way, let me go back to my mailbox here and just tidy this up. Let me close that off and let me go back to here. So where this is all held is in the Azure portal, right? So we get a bit technical here. But basically what's happening is that if we go into Azure AD, what's happening here is it's creating an enterprise app here, right? So you see the option for enterprise app and app registrations. So what it's doing is it's creating a custom app in here. Okay, when it does that, what it then does, we go into that actual app, right? So that app is effectively like a user in Azure AD. So think of the app here like a user. Then what it does is that permission screen where the user says read, write all the files grants the permissions that are listed here. Right? So it adds permissions in here. So what that means now is because these are API permissions and you've accepted that, that app now has the capability to log in using an API, which is effectively a web request, so HTTP request, directly in to that environment with the permissions that you have agreed to without needing a login and a password. All right, so this is the existential threat that I would suggest is coming when users click this option. So if you see this with anything, you need to be really, really careful and understand and monitor what the hell this thing is doing. Because as you can appreciate, there is not much visibility into that Azure AD app, what it's doing, when it makes its calls, who is logging in, when it logs in, right? You don't see that as a normal user. It's not, a lot of this stuff is hidden in other logs, right? So again, it's a perfect mechanism to gain access to an environment. Now, the way I disable it is to use the magic of PowerShell, and I'm sure we'll see the magic of PowerShell before the end of today. That's the way I prefer it. It's a one-line PowerShell fix. But if you like your GUIs, you can also go into settings, org settings, user consent to apps, and then you would unselect that option and never allow users to authorize any OAuth applications. So that's my opinion. OAuth apps are out. For users, nope, can't be trusted. They are too dangerous for users to have access to. Now, of course, as we know, users will want to have certain applications, in their environments. Okay, so what we can do, the approach is again, an administrator, right, is the person that should go in and set these things up. So if you go into your go into your admin, go into the org settings, all right, and if we go in here, or is it, where are we? Office on the web, or is it integrated apps is the better option? Integrated apps looks like the better option. So the idea is that you can add those same applications in as an administrator. So what I've done here is I've added in find time, report, message, and anything else. So what's the one that I'm missing? Message header analyzer. So what I could do is go in here and get the app from the store. So if I go in here and go, will it find MHA? No. Okay, so I've got to find message header analyzer. So I would select it. Again, as noted, it is free. And I would have to fill in my details, blah, blah, blah. And notice it is a third-party application. Then once I've got the app, then what I can do is I can then apply that app to different groups in my organization. So once I've got it, I can then target that app to everybody. I can target that to a certain group of users. Okay, so you can see here I can remove it. And if I go into users, you'll see I can target it to just me, the entire organization, or specific users. It will then push it out automatically to the user's desktop, their desktop Outlook, and also their web interface as well. Okay, so turn off. Recommendation is to disable OAuth apps for users, so the users can't do it. And again, they go through a approval process where they fill in a Microsoft form, for example. That goes to a manager. The manager approves, yes, I'm happy for people to use it. Here's the sign off. And then you as an administrator would go in and enable it across the tenant or for those particular users. All right. Now, the other thing I'll show you while I'm in here is that we can also track our OAuth apps quite easily. And we haven't quite come to this, but we can track them quite easily with Cloud App Security. We'll come to Cloud App Security, but just think of this as another monitoring engine. So what we can do is we have Cloud App Security in here. You'll see that when it comes up, one of the menu options I've got up here is called OAuth Applications. So I can now look at the OAuth applications that have been enabled in my organization, how many people are using it, okay? And then what I can do is I can come over here and I can say, yes, they are approved, or no, they are banned. And obviously that will then stop them from communicating. So best practice is probably not to remove them if you do find them when you do an audit. The best practice is to go in and disable them or ban them, and then see if anybody complains or whinges or carries on. Okay. Now, the good thing about this is, for example, if I go in and click on one of these apps here, All right, it's going to give me more training. It's going to give me permissions levels, how often it's used. I can look at its activity, in the Azure AD log. So I can go in here and have a look in my cloud app security, to see if it is actually in play, if it's being used, when it's being opened. I can see the publisher. I can see their, if they've done the right thing, basically in here. Okay, so again, cloud app security is another way that you can, dive into seeing what's going on, and that should be, as it is, the next slide. Okay, so there are ways of monitoring OAuth, but by default they are a bit obscure, let's call it, and they do require a little bit of knowledge. But the tools are there, and that's one of the benefits we'll come to with cloud app security. It just makes life so much easier for monitoring and so on. So the takeaway there is that now is the time to start paying attention to the damage or the impact that OAuth applications could potentially have in your environment, okay, and then take the appropriate action. So again, start keeping an eye on it and then step back and say, well, do we really need this? Is a better approach that they are scanned, monitored, and we get reporting, and then we make a decision as to whether they're acceptable inside the organization. Okay, are there any questions on that before we do decide to move on? Okay, all looks good. All right, so let us talk about file security. Again, it could be a rather large topic. Hopefully most people are somewhat familiar with this. So again, let us go over the basics. Every file that is saved into the environment effectively has automatic versioning enabled. So what that means is that every file that is saved into OneDrive, every file that is saved into Teams, every file that is saved into SharePoint team sites has a backup made of it. Okay, so every time a file is updated or changed, a backup is maintained or kept of that file. Now, does anybody know by default how many versions or previous backups of a file are maintained by the system in total? Right, so in default. So by default, how many versions of each file are maintained by the system? So out of the box, how many versions of each file are potentially maintained? Does anybody know? So Brendan is correct. Well answered. 500. So by default, 500 versions of every single file will be maintained, and then the 501st version will be overwritten when it gets to that period of time. Now, remember that versioning doesn't create a copy of each file. It just maintains the deltas. You see the whole copy, obviously, but the actual storage space that it consumes is the deltas. Right, so it does optimize that space. Okay, now when we go into the version history and any of the locations there, you'll see that, and I'll show you here, you can go in and basically select to restore any previous version. So you can roll back to any previous version, and a user can do this. The user can do this directly themselves. So let us find a file here. So let me close my emails. Let me close my alert policies. Let me go to OneDrive as an example. And let's go and find a file here. One that I work on or one that I use regularly. So this one here called document. If I select the little cog there and go to the ellipses, you'll see that I've got 14 previous versions. And if I select this option here, I can delete that version to free up space. I can open the file and I can restore it. So if I restore it, version 11 will become the current version, and the current version will become version 15. So again, it'll just become another version effectively in the tree. Okay. Now, obviously, there's a trade-off here. Okay, so the trade-off is that every version does consume some space, a little bit of space, but it does consume some sort of space. Now you can go in and you can adjust the amount, the number of versions that are kept in each location. So you have control of adjusting that 500 to be less or to be more. But out of the box, you will get 500 versions of every single file. So again, if a user needs to recover a file, a previous version, they can do that quickly and easily. Right mouse click, select version, select the one they want, restore, done. No need for backup, no need for restore, no need to call the IT team to get a file back. Now, of course, hopefully everybody's aware that every file that is deleted goes to a recycle bin. Okay, so again, let us just show you what that experience looks like. So if I go in here and my mouse is gone, where's my mouse? There it is. If I go in here and unselect that one and then select demo, I'm going to delete the file. It says, are you sure? Of course I'm sure. And then as soon as I delete it, well, maybe I'm not so sure. And that will end up in the recycle bin. Okay, and again, to recover it, all I do is select the recycle bin and I restore. Now, the caveat here is that by default, the data in a recycle bin is not retained forever. It does get purged. Does anybody know what period of time, and I'll tell you it's days, how many days does data get retained in the recycle bin by default? So again, Kevin's right there, 93 days. Why is it 93 days? Because it's 3 times 31, so effectively 3 months. So you can recover a deleted file. Remember, this is deleted. So if a user deletes the file and it ends up in the recycle bin, it is retained for 93 days before it is purged. Okay. Now, if a user deletes a file and then goes into the recycle bin and deletes it again, so if I go in here, I'm in the recycle bin here, and I go in and delete this, right? Are you sure you want to remove it from the recycle bin? Okay, and I delete it. Has that file been purged totally from the system? Is that file now completely gone? So I've deleted the file from the library. I've deleted it from the recycle bin. Is that file now gone? If obviously I've done that in less than 93 days, is the file gone? Okay, so the file's not gone because what it goes into is what's known as the second stage recycle bin. Okay, so by default, you get the user recycle bin, which the user can access. You get a admin recycle bin, so that if data is deleted from the user's recycle bin within that 93-day period, it goes into the admin recycle bin, and then an administrator can restore that data from that recycle bin back to the location. So by default, we get the library, version control, we get a 2-stage recycle bin out of the box. That will cover us if there are any changes made to the file and we want to roll back to a previous change. And it will also cover for up to 500 versions, and it will cover a 93-day period by default. Now, one of the painful issues with doing that process is that trying to do a bulk restore can be difficult, right? So if you want to do multiple files here from the recycle bin, it can be a bit of a challenge. But luckily, there's a capability called Restore This Library, okay, which allows us to do in bulk for the past 30 days. So if we go up to here, go up to the cog, we go up to restore your OneDrive, in this case is where I'm at, and I can go in here and select the date and say 3 weeks ago, and it will now show me the files that have changed over that period of time, allow me to bulk select the files at that point in time. And then if I push the button, it would then restore those files that I've selected and overwrite those versions. So again, think of this of like doing bulk version recovery. So multiple file recoveries to their version. So this is available for up to 30 days. It's available in OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and all that sort of stuff. So all of that is built into the system. All right. Another question for you. So another common scenario is, hang on, let's do the questions first. Can it be restored by an administrator? That is correct. An administrator's recycle bin requires administrator privileges to restore. How do you handle recovery when the data in the second stage recycle bin is cleared? I'll come to that. Does recovery also recover the version history? Yes, absolutely. That's one of the big benefits of using the SharePoint process to recover, is that it will basically recover, that information, all the version history, check-in, check-outs, and all that sort of stuff for you as well. So here's another question. Let's say that I get even worse, that I go in there and I actually delete the user. Okay, so I've got a user. The user leaves, I delete the user's information, right, is then, they haven't got a license, so there's no license. How long is the user's private data, their OneDrive for Business data, retained? Who knows how long the OneDrive for Business deleted data is retained for? So there are two answers here. Right, the first answer is that yes, by default it's 30 days, but if you go in and configure things, data from a deleted OneDrive user can be retained for 10 years. Okay, so if a user's OneDrive for Business is deleted and you have this setting prior, you will be able to recover users' deleted data from their OneDrive for up to 10 years. That is part of the system at no cost. So again, one of the best practice settings would be is that you go and change this option from the default 30 days, which is the minimum, to the maximum, because there's no downside, there's no impact to your tenant of turning this capability on. All right. Now, someone asked the question about what happens if the second stage recycle bin is cleared within the 93 days or at the end of the 93-day retention period. Well, what you can do is you can set up something called a preservation hold library. A preservation hold library effectively is a third stage recycle bin, effectively. But it's a policy. So what you would do is you would create what's called a retention policy. You would then nominate, I want to keep the data in this SharePoint site, this team site, this OneDrive for a period of 7, 10, 99, 1,000 years. It would then apply this preservation hold library to that information, and anything that is then removed from the second stage recycle bin gets picked up by the policy and put into the preservation hold library for the period of the policy. Now, this preservation hold library lives in the site collection and is only accessible by administrators of that site collection. All right, so it's again administrators recycle bin, but importantly, it allows you to retain deleted data or age deleted data for a period of your nominated choice. Okay, so effectively we can retain deleted users' data for, data that was deleted for a user for 10 years, and we can effectively maintain data in SharePoint document libraries effectively forever. Now, as with anything security, there is a trade-off. What is the trade-off with enabling all of this stuff, turning it all on, using the recycle bin, using the preservation hold library? What's the trade-off, do you think? There must be a trade-off. There is always a trade-off in security. Who's got an idea? Yeah, correct. Storage is the trade-off here. So the more data you choose to retain in your SharePoint site, that counts against your common storage. So the common pool of storage for SharePoint is 1 terabyte plus 10 gigs per licensed user. Now that storage is common across SharePoint team sites and across Teams. OneDrive is independent. So everything that's deleted, the version controls and the recycle bins are all part of that 1 terabyte storage. Any preservation library that you enable in your shared locations counts against that global storage. All right, so where you typically see issues with implementing this is if you have, for example, a customer who uses and stores large CAD files or large video files or large pictures in their environment and they change them or they touch them or they sync them, then that's considered a change. They create a version and you end up with lots of versions and you fill up that shared storage very quickly. But for most users, you know, the 80% of people who are using Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDFs, you never see this issue. So again, you need to balance it up as to what makes the most sense here. There is a trade-off. Now, the other trade-off is the fact that I don't know how many of you have tried to recover multiple items or to find individual items inside a recycle bin, but it is quite challenging because, again, imagine the situation is that your, council comes to pick up your garbage. You put your garbage in your bin. They throw all your garbage into the truck with everybody else's garbage. So if you need to find something, you have to go to the truck and dig through everybody else's garbage to find your garbage. And then the truck goes to a tip and puts it in a bigger tip. So if you wanted to find your data at that point, then you've got to go through not only the truck, all the other trucks and everybody else in the whole area's garbage. So that's the other trade-off here. Okay. Are there any questions on data recovery, let's call it, in the world of files? So Cameron, again, not all files are good for using and syncing. My advice is you can use them, but you need to set it up and configure it correctly. But synchronizing large CAD files, yes, is not a very good idea. It can be done, but it needs a appropriate configuration applied. So again, generally not the best place for CAD files as you've nominated. Jerry asked if there's a PowerShell script available. Absolutely, there's a PowerShell command to go and turn that OneDrive for Business on to extend it to 10 years if you want. So it's just a single PowerShell command. Any other questions out there? Okay. So what is the number one benefit if a customer came to you and asked you what is the number one benefit, if you can boil it down to one thing, that Microsoft 365 would give me? Now, how would you answer that for a customer? What would be the one thing if you boil it down to what's the one business benefit for a customer of this whole environment? Any ideas? Can you boil it down to a single item? No, that's multiple features, Kevin. One single statement. Actually, it comes down to one single word. Litigation, no, not stability, not centralized, not security. The number one benefit that you should be talking to customers and help them understand is search. Everything that you put inside Microsoft 365 is searchable. And one of the ways that you can find that information is to use content search. Okay, so there's a couple of different methods. So content search is used to search through content that is current and you want to see what the details are. Okay, we'll come to the other ones, but just think of content search as I'm searching a file. Now, the big difference here is it can search the contents of that information, be it emails, files, messages, chats, all that sort of stuff is basically available through search. And the way we do that, if you go into the admin center, you go into the security area, you'll find something there called search, content search. And then when you run a content search, you basically specify the parameters like where do I want to search? Exchange, SharePoint, Teams. Who do I want to search? Which user? And then you'll see when you run the search, it will give you the results. Now, those results, as you notice in the bottom, sort of the bottom left over here, right, gives you the ability to export those. So I can export the results, export a report of the results. So I can always pull them down locally if I want. Now, in this case, it's generated, the search that I put in, 9 meg, and there are, 48 meg of unindexed items. So it's captured those. And if I click on this to view the information, you'll see here is some of the results. Now, the search that I ran, I was looking for the author here, Tim Ferriss, and you'll see that in this tenant, so this is this demo tenant I have, I can get to information that has been in there since 2017 when I first set up this demo tenant. So that's an extremely powerful capability. That information is available to me and I can export it, I can move it, I can view it, I can do whatever I want with it. So you can utilize the capabilities of things like content search to put your finger on information very, very quickly. Now, the benefit of content search is not only can you find that information and export the results, but you can save that search and reuse it over and over and over and over again and just refresh it. So you could have a standard search that maybe looks for people who are sending CVs, let's say, outside the organization. Every month you can rerun that search and see if there are any new results in there. And you can obviously trim the search to the dates and do all that sort of stuff. So search is an extremely powerful capability that you get from a user's point of view by searching for data, but also as an administrator trying to locate specific items of information. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Can you back up and restore Teams chats, so team chat conversations with a third-party tool? Can you back up a chat in a Teams channel and restore that back to a channel, the same channel inside Teams? Is that possible using a third-party backup tool? Anybody got any thoughts on whether that is possible? So the answer, as most people are correctly indicating, is no. You cannot back that up because simply the API does not support it. No third-party vendor can get access to a tool to do that. The best they can do is export the chats so that you can view them or copy and paste them back in. So my point here is to be very, very careful about the promises and the contracts you have with your customers. Because if you come to me as a customer and indicate that you are able to back up Microsoft 365, my assumption is going to be you can back up everything, including Planner, including Sway, including Teams chats, including, right, things that most people can't back up. So remember that if you are using a third-party product and you are making some sort of contractual commitment to your customers, that you understand what you can and can't do. Typically, third-party products can back up mailboxes, mail items in shared mailboxes and user mailboxes. They can back up the files in Teams, the files in SharePoint, the files in OneDrive, but they can do generally little more than that. Now, they are improving, they are adding features, they are enhancing it. But again, be very, very careful as to the promises and the contractual arrangements you're making with customers when it comes to things like backup. Now, the next capability in search is called eDiscovery. Now, the difference with eDiscovery is if you have a look across the top, you will see I have some additional options here. Not only can I do my searches, I can do what's called holds. So what that means is if I do a search and I find information, I can put it on hold to prevent the user from changing or deleting it, which means it will always be available to make queries on. Now, largely, eDiscovery has come from the law background, the legal background. So typically what happens is in the good old days, the customer would say, we're suing you. The lawyers would send your lawyers a letter saying, we need all the correspondence for discovery that are from this user about this between these dates. So you'd pack up all this paper, ship it off or copy it and ship it off to the other lawyers and away we go. They'd use that for the court case. How do we do that electronically? Well, that means we're going to have some capability to pull emails, correspondence, documents, chats, all of that stuff together and provide that also for that discovery process. So eDiscovery is exactly that process. So it has a number of benefits that you can use in non-legal situations, but that's what it's designed for. Now, the point that I will make here is that, again, you can save this, you can run it, you can, revisit it as often as you want. There are two things to remember. There are, I suppose, two major things to think about when it comes to here is if I am an insider, let's say I'm a technical person who has administrative rights to an environment and I want to extract a copy of the CEO's mailbox without the CEO knowing, what's the best tool to achieve that? The answer is eDiscovery. Right, so as an administrator, I could run an eDiscovery search over the CEO's mailbox, take a copy of all their information, export it to a PST, and then take it off-site. How would you know that that has ever happened? So the way that you can do that is there are alerts, as we've noted, that will inform you or set off the bells and the whistles when an eDiscovery search is initiated. All right, so again, consider that for an insider style attack as well. The other side of this is if you haven't used content search and if you haven't used eDiscovery, then I would suggest it's a good opportunity to go in and start having a look at these and understanding where they are, what they do, and basically, what's involved. Run an eDiscovery search or process before you're actually asked to do it yourself. So let's go into security here and let us just see. All right, so if we go down here, hopefully it might be in compliance. Yes, I think it's in compliance. So let me go back to here and let me go to all of these options. Sorry, all my options? Go to, where are we? Compliance, sorry. Okay, so down here, you'll see, again, you'll see under here, here's our content search. All right, so you can have multiple content searches. If you want, you can configure them, you can export them. So here's the one that I showed you on my slides when this comes up. So here's the one that I ran. See, here are the actions. I can rerun it, I can edit it, I can delete it. So in this case, if I edit it, give it a friendly name, you'll see that I'm only searching mailboxes. I can search SharePoint sites, public folders. and I can put in the condition. So I'm looking for these keywords. I can have received. I can add, multiple conditions down here. So it's quite powerful in what it basically can do. Once you've done that and set that all up, like I said, then you can run it and you would get out, the results. So let's go up and back to content search. So if I go into this again, and I can go in here and you'll see these are the items that it's recovered, and I would select the item to review the sample and go in and have a look at it there. But if the content changes, then my search may be out of whack there. So again, think of that as what it currently is. E-discovery down here, you'll see under core, you've got the capability to basically do the same sort of thing. So the searching concept is exactly the same as content search, except you sort of bundle it together in this, what they call a case. And if you want, you can put that stuff on hold so that is retained forever and the user can't delete it or remove it. Now remember, this hold capability is not available in the basic plans. It's a Microsoft 365 Business Premium or above generally. So it's not available in the basic plans. So here's the exports, and it will track the exports. It will audit them and so on. So these are the two big options. Remember, e-discovery largely comes from a legal background, where core discovery where content search is largely, an admin, sort of an admin function. All right. Now, the thing to consider before we go and take a break here is that if you needed to do e-discovery, and let's imagine the scenario, if a lawyer came to your customer and said, right, we're suing you, we need to see all this correspondence, blah, blah, blah. The customer's just going to turn around and hand it to you and say, provide this. How would you do that? How long would it take you to do that? Do you know the right process to ensure that? Now, the interesting thing then there is, okay, not a lot of people have that experience. There's not a lot of people in SMB that do that. If you want to do it formally, you would normally have to go to a large accounting, one of the top, whatever they are, 4 or 5 accounting firms, and they're going to charge you, tens of thousands of dollars to do e-discovery and the process and per minute billing and all that sort of stuff. So there's not a lot of people in SMB who are focused on compliance and legal discovery and, all these sort of things. So there is a business opportunity there. Yes, you can do other things, but I haven't seen anybody who really has invested the time to, understand e-discovery, legal requirements, the law, how to do this, a process. And then if they did, they could then, take that knowledge and bundle it up and potentially resell it to other people in SMB. Okay, at obviously a competitive price compared to the high level people out there. So again, you need to look at these sort of things. If you don't use it, that's great. Again, spend some time getting familiar with it. So if you do need it, you've seen it before. But also from a business point of view, sit there and have a think about, well, maybe there's a business opportunity. I don't see anybody else doing that. Yes, it'll be a little bit hard and require a little bit of time investment to get up to speed to understand all the nuances of it, but that's going to give me advantage because nobody else is actually doing that. What is the difference between core and advanced e-discovery? Basically, an upgraded license, effectively a enhanced cost. So the advanced e-discovery is going to give you the ability to do things like close matching, fuzzy logic. So you can say, well, they were talking about Bitcoin, but, this person over here was also talking about Ethereum. Maybe Ethereum sort of is the same as Bitcoin because it's cryptocurrency. So the advanced features use the machine learning and AI to look at those sort of capabilities rather than just the pure search, the pure terms as defined in the core. So the advanced is really looking at behaviors, right, rather than necessarily just the pure mechanics of search. So that's, in a nutshell, the easiest way to define sort of the differences. What is the difference between content search and e-discovery? So content search is a search of the content at this point in time. If you ran the content search 2 minutes later, the content will be different. If you ran it tomorrow, it will be different. So every time you run a content search, it is the content at that point in time, and the content can continue to change underneath there. An e-discovery allows you to search the content and put it on hold so that you have a full copy of that discovered information at that point in time. So that means even if the content changes, you are able to look at a copy from the point in time that you ran the search. And again, that's largely from the legal component that I need to look at it at this point in time. So that's largely the difference between content search and e-discovery. E-discovery allows you, once you discover the content, to put it on hold and take effectively a snapshot of that content at that point in time and save that away so you can analyze it, whereas the content search will only look at stuff that is, current, and then if you run it again, if the content's changed, then that's what you're going to see. Okay, any other questions? Right, so I make it on the hour here, so let us stop recording.